Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to online session number 1 for the Mooloolah Valley proposed local plan area. Council is committed to undertaking thorough community engagement for this project, while also keeping our community and staff safe. That is our highest priority. Now, due to the current COVID-19 health risks, some of the scheduled events that we had for in-person have had to be cancelled. Community input is important, and to ensure that we receive as much feedback as possible, Council has scheduled live online sessions and is utilising a range of other online tools to receive your input. At the same time, you can also visit a display at our Council customer service desk, library, or mobile library. A bit of housekeeping for today's session. Some of you may not be familiar with using Teams, so I want to just walk you through some steps. Regardless of this online session, you're encouraged to provide your feedback via the website, by phone or email, and that's current until the 31st of March of this year. For this session, though, we encourage your questions through the chat function. Now, if you can't find the chat function, if you're on a mobile device, there's usually a little bubble up in the top right-hand or left-hand corner. If you press that, it will take you through to the chat function. Now, we will try to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the session, but any outstanding questions can be answered at any time by our team on the phone or by email. A recording of this presentation will also be published on the event page following the session. Before we commence with today's session, I'd like to say the Sunshine Coast Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land, the Kabi peoples and the Jinnabara peoples, their connection to their traditional lands, and their role in shaping the identity of the Sunshine Coast. So for today's presentation, I have Jason, who's the new Plan Scheme Project Coordinator. I will be your moderator. I'll be fielding the questions as they come in. And following the presentation, I'll lead and facilitate a question session with Jason. And now I pass over to Jason to take you through the session.
Thank you, Paul. And hello, everyone. Just first of all, we just wanted to touch upon the purpose of this session. Essentially, it's about informing you about the new planning scheme project and the preliminary consultation that we're currently undertaking. We're also wanting to explain how this proposal relates to your particular local area, being the Mooloolah Valley proposed local plan area. We also are keen to get some information to you on how to get involved and have your say during this public consultation period. So just in terms of the new planning scheme project, just some brief background. So to fill you in with some of the where we've got to so far. So just as a starting point, it was important probably just to explain for those of you that may not know what is actually a planning scheme. We work with planning schemes all the time, but for many of you, you may not be too familiar with exactly what they do. Essentially, planning schemes are legal documents that are prepared by local councils to manage growth and development within the local government area. They set out a vision and a strategy to help manage that growth over time. They set out the state, regional and local development assessment requirements that need to be considered when assessing development. They obviously need to balance various interests, environment, economic and social interests, to ensure that those things are equally considered in the assessment of development. And development means a number of different things under the Queensland planning legislation. It may be making a change of use on a site, it could be subdividing land, or it could be undertaking engineering work, vegetation clearing work, or establishing or erecting advertising signs and the like. It's also important to note that we do have a current planning scheme in place, the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme 2014, which was, as the name suggests, was adopted by Council in May 2014 and is the current planning scheme for the Sunshine Coast. In terms of the new planning scheme project, Council resolved in January 2021 to prepare a new planning scheme under the Queensland Planning Act. This followed a review of the current planning scheme that took place during 2020. Now, that review found that whilst the current planning scheme was operating effectively, there was certainly room for improvement in terms of achieving greater alignment with regional and state policies that have come down since the planning scheme was prepared, and also to incorporate better information and data through the planning scheme process. The new planning scheme project is a multi-year project and will has a number of steps. It's intended to be completed by around 2024, so still 2 to 3 years to go. There are many interests and stakeholders involved in a planning scheme process, and there's a balance to achieve there in terms of looking at those multiple competing interests and how we can achieve a suitable balance of those various interests. And once again, once the new planning scheme is finalised and adopted, it will replace the current planning scheme. Just a quick overview of the planning framework that we, as a local government, must work within when preparing a new planning scheme. It's important to say that the planning schemes must be consistent with state and regional planning policies. So council, even though the council is the main author of the planning scheme, it must also seek to align the planning scheme with those state and regional interests. And that includes such things as the Planning Act. There's also the state planning policy, which sets out the state interests for planning schemes, and also the South East Queensland Regional Plan, shaping shaping SEQ, which is the primary land use planning document for the SEQ region as a whole. The planning scheme will also seek to integrate more local planning interests as well, and council has done a lot of work over the last several years in this space, getting a lot of great planning strategy work prepared to help inform the planning scheme and other council projects. These include such things as the Sunshine Coast Design Strategy, or the Yellow Book that some of you may have heard of, the Coastal Hazard Adaptation Strategy, the Environment and Livability Strategy, as well as Council's Corporate Plan, which sets out Council's vision for the region to be healthy, smart and creative as we work towards being Australia's most sustainable region. There is a process to follow when preparing new planning schemes, and this flow diagram here is a simplified way of showing those steps. This shows an 8-step process, and as it shows here, we are currently in step 2 of the process, and that is undertaking preliminary public consultation for the new planning scheme. This is the first of 2 main consultation steps for the project. The second main round of public consultation will be in step 5, where the second blue arrow is pointing to, which is essentially seeking formal public consultation on the draft content of the new planning scheme. So that's going to happen probably further down the line, most likely sometime in 2023. But as I said, the main game at the moment is the preliminary consultation period for the new planning scheme, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So just getting into the preliminary consultation, some of you may have looked at the website already to obtain some of the information in relation to the preliminary consultation, and certainly the website with an online engagement is certainly the main port of call, if you like, to get the information you may be seeking. Certainly there's a wealth of information there and a lot of information to get through, and hopefully this session will help to unpack some of that information for you. In terms of the preliminary consultation, probably the first point just to make is that this consultation, the preliminary consultation, is not actually a requirement of the state planning legislation to undertake preliminary consultation. So it's a non-mandatory step for preparing a new planning scheme. However, Sunshine Coast Council is committed to undertaking thorough community engagement with the community, and as part of that, early consultation is seen as an essential step in that process. So it's certainly an opportunity. Preliminary consultation provides an opportunity to help have early input into the planning scheme process before we actually go away and draft a new planning scheme. In terms of the current preliminary consultation, there's probably a few main things that we're seeking feedback from the community. We have prepared a proposed vision and regional planning directions for the Sunshine Coast region as a whole, a strategic framework, if you like, for the new planning scheme. We also are seeking feedback from the community around some proposed boundaries for the local plan areas that we've identified for the new planning scheme. For those local plan areas, we've also identified a specific vision and some local planning directions for each of the local plan areas. And that's something that we'll be discussing more in this session, in particular with the Mooloolah Valley local plan area. We also have released some information on the website around some topical planning issues that have been raised by the community and other stakeholders that we're aware of that need, I guess, some feedback from the community at this stage as to what the community thinks about those particular issues. So the feedback that we're seeking through the preliminary consultation is primarily being sought via the completion of surveys and other online tools. So once again, the council's Have Your Say website is where those feedback tools can be found. And the preliminary consultation period, important to note that it finishes on the 31st of March of this year. So as mentioned, the preliminary consultation, as part of this, we've released a proposed vision for what the Sunshine Coast could look like in 2041. And that broad overarching vision is replicated on this slide that you can read for yourselves on the screen in front of you now. It also includes regional and local planning directions to help achieve that particular vision and to manage the growth and change we're expecting until 2041. We also are seeking to reflect what the community values and what they would like to see into the future based on previous consultation and what we're hearing from the community. It also, once again, seeking to achieve a balance that meets those different needs and interests of various interests across the Sunshine Coast, which is a diverse community of communities. In terms of the regional planning directions to manage growth and change, they provide more detailed guidance around how we're seeking to achieve the stated vision for the new planning scheme. And these are set out under 5 main themes, being shaping sustainable growth, a smart economy, a healthy and resilient environment, a strong and creative community of communities, and a connected people and places. So under those themes, we've developed a range of regional planning directions and vision statements to help achieve those various themes that are broadly structured around Council's corporate plan, and you'll see that healthy, smart, creative coming through in those themes. So that's part of the consultation at the moment to seek feedback on those big picture regional directions. So more information about those can be found on Council's website. There is also a survey, a specific survey that's been structured around those regional planning themes for the new planning scheme, and we would certainly encourage you to complete one of those regional surveys to provide feedback to us on how you think those directions are, whether they're heading in the right direction, whether they've got those right or not, and whether you have any other suggestions. This map on the screen now is what we're calling a proposed settlement pattern map for the Sunshine Coast. It's essentially what we would call a strategic plan, if you like, for the new planning scheme looking out to 2041. And it shows a number of important elements to summarise a number of those, I guess, shaping that sustainable growth for the region. It includes a number of key elements, including the centre network, so all the various centres that are the focus for employment, retail and commercial. Obviously showing Maroochydore as the principal regional activity centre for the Sunshine Coast, and a range of supporting centres scattered throughout the coast and the hinterland that help to support that function. We also have a range of living areas that are identified, the coastal living areas the hinterland living areas, the rural residential areas that are also located throughout the region, as well as some of the new communities such as Palmview, Caloundra South, and potentially in the longer term Biwa East, which is west of Aura on the western side of the highway. It also shows existing and future employment areas and enterprise areas, industry areas, which are important employment generators for the coast and economic activity. There's also a range of other elements shown, including significant green spaces, such as the regional interurban break between Greater Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. So that forestry land essentially that you see as you travel into the Sunshine Coast from Brisbane. Also the lower Mooloolah floodplain, which has been earmarked as a major green space area within the coastal corridor between Caloundra and Palmview. There's also the Blue Heart project that is identified on this map, that is the Maroochy River floodplain area, and the importance of that area in terms of future climate resilience and environmental outcomes. There's also some other elements shown on this map that you may wish to note, including some of the major transport networks, including the CAMCOS heavy rail network and the proposed mass transit corridor between Caloundra and Maroochydore. As well as the big picture regional planning approach for the new planning scheme, as part of this preliminary consultation, we also are keen to seek feedback from the community on some local planning approaches that we're proposing. So we've identified a number of local plan areas as part of that approach, and each of those local plan areas has a proposed vision statement and planning directions to manage future growth within that particular local plan area. And these local plan area directions respond to a number of issues. You know, what are the key constraints and opportunities that are presented within that local plan area? What are the community values and aspirations that the community has these areas? And what are some of the local issues and challenges that might be arising? And how can the planning scheme help to achieve some of those, meet some of those issues and challenges? The local planning approach that we're proposing also has a number of benefits, recognising that the Sunshine Coast is a community of communities and ensuring that we are protecting local character, which is seen as important. And also recognising that the planning scheme is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and we need to adopt tailored approaches for different parts of the council area. So this slide shows the proposed local plan areas under the new planning scheme that we're seeking feedback from the community on at the moment. So in total, there are 18 proposed local plan areas for the Sunshine Coast region, covering the whole of the local government area. And we particularly have highlighted here the Mooloolah Valley local plan area, which is the subject of this presentation. And you can see that where it sits in relation to the other local plan areas in the Sunshine Coast region. These boundaries that have been defined for the local plan areas have been based upon locality boundaries, suburb boundaries, other major elements and features such as major roads and the like to define these areas. So just now I'd like to just touch upon the proposed local plan area for Mooloolah Valley and what is proposed at the moment under the current preliminary consultation and what we're specifically seeking feedback from the community on. So the proposed Mooloolah Valley local plan area, it's located in the central part of the Sunshine Coast, essentially west of the Bruce Highway. It's centred around this township of Mooloolah and also takes in the broader communities of interest of Mooloolah Valley and also Glenview. The area also takes in some other parts of localities, including Diamond Valley, parts of Palmview, particularly west of the Bruce Highway, Tenawa and Ilkley, and the northern part of Landsborough. In terms of the role of the Mooloolah Valley local plan area in the context of the region, there's a number of different roles that we've identified for this area. There's the hinterland living, rural and rural residential living experiences that this area provides. There's also some tourism elements that are well defined, including Aussie World, the big cart track, and some other approvals for tourism development along the Steve Irwin Way. It's also recognised that this area has some really significant regional landscape values that are really important to defining the landscape features of the region. There's also some major infrastructure elements that are located within the local plan area, including the North Coast Rail Line that traverses the area, and also major water supply elements, including the Ewan Matic Dam, which is a part of the South East Queensland water network. The area of Mooloolah Valley is also recognised as having major habitat and biodiversity values that are also recognised as having a region-wide role in the Sunshine Coast. In terms of the draft vision for the Mooloolah Valley, this is contained in the material on Council's website. So if you find the Mooloolah Valley local plan sheet, this will contain the vision statement for this particular local plan area. And this vision statement is a word picture out to 2041 as to what we would see success being for the Mooloolah Valley planning area if the planning strategy was to be successful. And it certainly is centred around, the vision for the area certainly centred around the scenic value and landscape setting that the area contains. Also recognising Mooloolah's role as the main town centre within this area, retaining its village character and also its railway character, being one of the rail towns on the North Coast rail line. It's also an area that's characterised by low density, low rise development on relatively larger urban lots as a defining element. The vision also anticipates the potential for some greater housing diversity to be achieved in locations that may be in close proximity to the town centre of Mooloolah and the railway station. It's also anticipated that surrounding rural residential areas would enjoy and continuing to enjoy that semi-rural lifestyle on the relatively large lots. The vision also anticipates that the Aussie World, Big Cart Track and other tourist facilities and attractions will continue to develop and grow and improve their offer to tourists over time. And the vision also anticipates that there'll be ongoing protection of the Mooloolah River catchment and the Ewan Matic Dam catchment as important environmental, ecological and water supply sources. So in terms of the vision, how do we achieve the vision? We then identify a series of proposed local planning directions for the Mooloolah Valley to help ensure that vision is achieved. And these directions are summarised on the next couple of slides. So in terms of those planning directions, there's anticipated to be no or minimal change in building heights under the new planning scheme for this area. Typically 8.5 metres and 2 stories would be the maximum in most cases. There's not anticipated to be no or minimal expansion to the urban and rural residential extents under the new planning scheme, so no significant expansion there expected. There's also a desire to retain urban breaks between Mooloolah and other settlements and townships to ensure that each township remains its own identity and as a discrete township settlement. It's also a planning direction to ensure that rural residential development continues to occur within zoned areas, so it's areas that are specifically zoned for that purpose. Also, a planning direction is to seek to retain the compact centre at Mooloolah, so the town centre remains quite a compact town centre and doesn't spread or expand into residential areas or other locations outside of the centre. Just continuing with the planning directions for the Mooloolah Valley, as alluded to in the vision, there certainly is, we're looking at investigating some opportunities for some housing diversity closer to the town centre of Mooloolah within walkable catchment of the township and and the train station. And this would more likely be in the form of things such as dual occupancies and townhouses and that more low to medium sort of density development. There's also a desire to maintain the current limits on subdivision outside of the town and rural residential areas. So in the rural areas, maintaining a relatively large lot size to maintain the rural production and landscape character values of those areas. We've also already mentioned that the desire to continue to develop Aussie World and other tourist attractions in accordance with their approvals and master plans that have been in place over those sites over the years. They're also seeking to retain limits on vegetation clearing to ensure that biodiversity values and landscape values are maintained and protected in the area. We also are seeking to maintain the Sippick Creek area, which is essentially the area west of the Bruce Highway and north of Aussie World within a rural zoning under the new planning scheme. And finally, once again, coming through and reinforcing through a planning direction is the desire to maintain the water quality in the Mooloolah River and the Pneumatic Dam catchments for those biodiversity and water quality water resource objectives. In each of the proposed local plan areas and the information we've provided as part of this consultation, we've also indicated for each of these local plan areas, what's the anticipated level of proposed change for these locations? And this is summarised on this slide. So for the Mooloolah Valley local plan area, it's anticipated that opportunities for further growth and development will be relatively low. Both compared to the existing scheme and the proposed new planning scheme, very low change is anticipated. And certainly from the current on the ground situation to what might be possible or the capacity that might be left in through a new planning scheme for further development, once again, quite a low level of change is anticipated. Just to give you a bit of an indication of what you might anticipate through the new planning scheme project and the level of change. So what does that all mean? So I think this is about telling us what you think in relation to this preliminary consultation that we've released for community feedback at the moment. And providing us some feedback is sought through the Have Your Say website is the main channel to include that feedback. You can scan the QR code here or jump on that web link that's provided and pull up the relevant information for the Mooloolah Valley local plan area or other areas of interest that you may have as part of this project. And some of the things that we're seeking feedback from for these local plan dimensions are, do you agree with the proposed vision that we've come up with and the proposed directions for your local plan area? Are the proposed boundaries that we've identified about right? Is there anything else you want to see protected or enhanced through the planning scheme process? And are there other types of development that you'd like to see encouraged or supported in your local area? So they're just sort of some things that we're sort of posing, I suppose, as things that we'd be seeking feedback on as part of this process. And as I said, the survey for the local plan areas is perhaps the best way to express those desires and feedback to us. So in summary, Council is preparing a new planning scheme and this consultation is currently underway, which is a preliminary consultation phase for the project at the very initial stages of the process, and will be one of two main opportunities to have your say. The second, as I mentioned, will be once we draft a proposed planning scheme, that will be released for further public consultation in due course, and that will include much more detail around the specific zonings and provisions that will be included in the draft planning scheme, and that'll be open for comment at a later period. So this preliminary consultation closes on the 31st of March of this year. So certainly getting your feedback in before then is certainly encouraged. As I mentioned, you can provide your feedback by filling in a survey, scanning the QR code here and jumping on the website. Or separately looking up the Council's Have Your Say website in your own time. And of course, Myself and our staff in council are keen to respond to your questions. So there's a variety of ways that can be done through the online website. There's a callback service. There's a question and answer function on the actual website. You can call us or email us, and all those details are on the contact us details on the website. So that concludes the presentation component of this session. I hope you've found that information we've provided here of assistance in finding out more about the preliminary consultation and the ways and means by which you can become involved. So thank you for your attention. I will now pass back to Paul so that we can have a look at the question and answer segments as that's come through on the chat. Thank you, Paul.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Thank you for that. For a great presentation. Just to take us into the question and answer segment of the session. So we've got 30 minutes, around about 30 minutes for questions. Obviously, depending on how many we get, we'll dictate how we can field them and get back to you. Got to encourage everyone, the way to submit your questions is via the Q&A function, which I've got up on a screen next to me. So I'm just checking that as we're proceeding. You can also provide feedback via the QR code. So on your screen in front of you, that little square right in the middle, on the bottom is the QR code. I'll take you straight to our website. That's the place to make your formal submission. And now at some point, just in this next segment, I'll take you through that website so you can understand where it is and how to find the relevant information that we just talked about. Also how to make your submission or a survey. So yeah, and there's plenty of other ways to get in contact with us. We have got staff available every day until 31st of March, so you can phone up, email, or request a callback, and then we can get into more detailed discussions. But today's session is very much about getting that information out to you. So really informing you what it is, where it is, and then how to make that submission. So we have had a couple of questions come in. Now, some of these aren't specific to the consultation process that we're in at the minute, but I'll just have a chat with Jason about that. So there's one question from Peta Scott around what is the minimum lot size? Now that's something that wouldn't be dictated at this part of the process.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'll just jump in and answer that one. So as Paul rightly pointed out, at this moment, the minimum lot sizes are yet to be determined in the new planning scheme, but you could use the existing planning scheme as a bit of a guide as to what those minimum lot sizes may be in the new planning scheme. So, for example, my understanding of the Mooloolah Township Code under the current planning scheme sets a minimum lot size in the order of 1,000 square metres for a town allotment, so a minimum lot size of 1,000 square metres, and for a rural residential type allotment in the order of 4,000 square metres. So in the old terminology, a quarter acre block and an acre block for a rural residential situation. So I suppose through the new planning scheme, those lot sizes will be up for review, but certainly we're keen to maintain the character of the Mooloolah and surrounding areas, and lot size is a defining element of that. So we'll be examining that in closer detail, and further details, as I mentioned, will be released once the actual draft planning scheme is released for consultation. Those sorts of details will be then available for further consultation with the community.
I have a question about housing diversity and how that's been suggested at planning directions. There was a comment that there's not potentially much vacant land close to the town centre. Is there a way that a submission can be made around that?
Well, certainly we'd be keen to hear from the community at this early stage around what does the community think about achieving some greater housing diversity in the Mooloolah local plan area. Certainly, you know, our changing population and growing population, there's perhaps a need to provide some greater choice in housing for the different demographics across our region. So certainly we'd be wanting to explore and investigate further the opportunities that may be presented to achieve some of that housing diversity, particularly in locations that are very well located to the centre, within walkable distances to the centre of Mooloolah town, and indeed the railway station. So we'll certainly be looking at that further and be keen to get some initial feedback from the community on those proposals.
Similar question has come in around changing of zones. So, for example, changing rural residential, changing residential to rural residential, and changing rural residential, some rural to rural residential. So that changing of zones, is that something that we would be considering at this part of the process, or is that later on?
Yeah, once again, zonings will be further worked through as we start getting into the drafting of the actual planning scheme itself. So we'll be drafting some words and we'll be drafting some maps for the new planning scheme in due course. This preliminary consultation is perhaps the main indicators we're suggesting at the moment through this preliminary consultation is that those areas are not likely to change too significantly under the new planning scheme at this stage, is our thinking. So existing rural residential areas that are already zoned and allocated for that purpose are likely to continue to be allocated for that purpose. And likewise for low density residential areas within the township itself are likely to be maintained for that purpose. In certain cases, rural residential could be converted to lower to a more intensive sort of subdivision potential in certain cases, but we see that as being quite limited in the Mooloolah area, as a lot of those parcels have already been subdivided and quite fragmented ownership, and other environmental and other constraints will perhaps make that transition quite difficult.
I had a question regarding townhouses and multi-unit dwellings. The question whether this is relevant, whether we know a percentage of these that would be government funded housing.
Yeah, look, certainly that's a difficult question to answer from my perspective. Certainly social housing, those sorts of arrangements are more of a state government function. Council certainly does its bit to help advocacy and to help ensure that the planning settings that we have in our planning scheme help to encourage and facilitate those sorts of housing options for the community. But yeah, very difficult to sort of hazard a guess as to what those percentages may be. But fair to say that where we can achieve some greater diversity in close to the town centre, that would certainly is something that we're keen to investigate.
Got a similar question, which isn't necessarily directly related to the process we're in, around the transport levy. Can you understand what is the relationship between the transport levy in terms of what we do? It's not something we would expect a submission on through this process.
No, certainly the transport levy, you know, council through its rating system can levy different elements, whether it's the environment levy or the transport levy. They're matters beyond the scope of a planning scheme. Certainly what the planning scheme can do is help to ensure that the growth and settlement pattern that we are proposing is supported by the transport network, and ensure that we leverage off that investment in transport infrastructure as much as possible. But yeah, certainly the transport levy is a separate consideration to the planning scheme.
I've got one final question about housing. What do we mean by investigate opportunities for housing?
I suppose from our point of view, it's really about, we don't have all the answers. And so it's really about exploring those options in a bit more detail and particularly around the township of, in and around the township of Mooloolah, and where those opportunities may lie, where there might be some low-hanging fruit, so to speak, I guess, that could be seen as some logical and reasonable locations where that sort of housing could be established in the longer term. It's probably also important to note that a planning scheme can have some allowance for certain things to occur, but the planning scheme doesn't make the development happen. The development happening is a decision that's made by the property owners or the developers as to whether they take those up. So that's something we're just simply meaning that we'll be doing a bit more work to investigate those opportunities and locations where that may be achievable.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that when we talk about opportunities, this is something that's probably suitable for submission. From the community, we want to hear if they see possible opportunities out there, and certainly everything we've talked about today, it is about putting it out there. We want to hear back. We want to hear your thoughts on what's being proposed. And there's a way to do that. We have had a question come in about how do I make my submission? How do I find this information? So I thought it might be a good time to just walk you through some aspects of the website so you can understand where to go to. And if you're familiar with, I'll just come out of this presentation and come into the website. If you give me a second, and we'll. There we go. That should be visible to everyone. So the website itself, we've got a specific part of the Sunshine Coast Council website designed to handle these consultations where all the information it requires contained in one area and a sort of little sub website within it. If you go up to the top corner here, you'll see an area called sites, and come down to have your say. Have your say page has a list of all the consultations currently open for public consultation. And right at the top there, we've got the new planning scheme project page. So you click on that, and that will take you through to our main, what we call a landing page, the home page. This is where you will be able to navigate to all the different aspects of the consultation, the information sessions, similar to what we're in today, number one. We've also got our regional planning. So all these are links you can go through, step down into the website and get access to more and more information. To go in and look at your local area, you'll go in via this link. The next one, hot planning topics, which are some of the top themes that are coming out over the last number of years, which we think the community are interested in. We're keen to hear your views on that as well. I'll take you to that in a second. We've got a video on the project, and then more detail down here. If you like to read PDFs, for example, you can get in and read the actual documents itself. Complete documents are linked in here into the page, as well as opportunities for further comments. So we've got an FAQ. So if you want to read some of the top questions, we've got top 10 questions and answers that may be of interest to you. You can click on that and have a read, understand why we're doing planning scheme, why are we looking for feedback. There's also opportunities to contact us directly. So even though we are unfortunately in a position where we can only do these online sessions at this point in time, there's always the ability to speak to a planner during business hours. You can always email us. You can request a callback until such time as we can come back out and engage in a face-to-face manner. So to take you back up to the local information, this is where this will be of most interest to you as a resident of Mooloolah. Well, how do I get to my proposal for Mooloolah Valley? In this page, we've got a bit of an explanation of why we're doing local planning, what's the benefits of it, and then down to this very interactive and handy map, which enables you to click on any of the local plan areas. And this one is the Mooloolah Valley. If you click on that, it'll take you straight through to your page. So this is your page with a lot of information in different ways to engage it. You can click on these little icons on the image, and it will tell you the planning directions which are being proposed for Mooloolah Valley. You can then scroll further down, and you probably now recognize some of this information as what we've broadcast to you through the presentation. We very purposely did that. We want to be giving you as much visual cues as to what it is that we're talking about proposing, and then you can come back and find it yourself. So you can go directly to this link, and it will bring up everything, the entire proposal for that Mooloolah Valley local plan area. So that's a good source of information. We've got these handy barometers on all the pages to try and indicate to you a sense of what is the change that you could expect as a consequence of these planning directions. Is it going to be a very low to very high change for that area? So just to give you a bit of a feel for how we view, obviously, the change right out to 2041. And most critically, which we think is this is the way to really get involved and be engaged in the processes to take the survey. So we've established quite a simple survey with a series of questions and abilities to put in information, so you can directly feed into the process and respond to those proposals that we have out there. You can also ask a question. So on all these little plan pages, we've got a little facility. Once you sign in and become registered to the page, you can then pose a question, and a planner will review that and respond within 2 days. And those questions will then be visible to everyone, so the whole community will be able to see, is there common questions being raised, or someone's already answered that question. So a very handy tool. Coming back up to the information session. So we're in the information session now. This is the first time we as strategic planning, as council, have really used this mechanism, this online facility. We're using Teams Live to engage with the community. I'll admit we're learning about good ways to use it, but what we're trying to do as well is we're just relying on this particular forum. When you go to the information session, following this session when it ends, if you go back to your Mooloolah Valley event page, we will upload this presentation to this page, so you'll be able to go back in and watch the presentation again, try and absorb the information at a better pace if it was a bit too quick for you, and probably help you again in terms of coming back and trying to re-engage with the website and trying to make a submission. Ultimately, what we would like you to do is to give us a submission, answer a survey, tell us what you think of those directions. So yeah, that's hopefully a helpful little step through of how to engage with the website where the information is. One other thing I will actually work here is just show you the hot topics. So this is probably a very good relevance more broadly across the region, will apply in some cases to your local plan area as well. But there's a series of themes that have come out over the years, and then as we've implemented the current planning scheme, that we think need to be discussed and considered as we move forward to the new plan scheme. So matters such as affordable living and housing affordability, car parking, carports, climate change, the design of multiple dwelling units, dual occupancies and secondary dwellings, service stations, short-term accommodation, the supply and use of industrial land, and uses within rural areas. So when you click into any of these, it will take you through to further information on that theme. You can read it, understand some of the information that we've collated over the years on our thinking and some of these issues. And then again, a bit of a steering as to what do you think as a community? What would you like us to do in respect of these matters? So that's pretty much covering the main parts to really go to. I encourage you all to go and have a look at that site. If you do struggle to find it, by all means, contact us and by email or phone, and then we can walk you through that. I think that's covered the website elements for the community. Yeah. I'll just check if there's any more questions that have come through. No, so it looks like we've got no more questions. I haven't had some for a few minutes. I might call a wrap to this session if that's okay. And if anyone is wishing to have a more detailed discussion, we are available, like I said, every day until the 31st of March. The purpose of the session was very much about getting the information out to you, to have those detailed one-on-one discussions. That's what we're here for. We're here for every day until 31st of March. So by all means, give us a call, email us, and please have a look on the website and tell us what you think. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your attention. It's been great.